What's up? What's happening? Welcome into a special crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making both Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's show, we're going to dive into both the Chicago Blackhawks and Minnesota Wild. Some burning questions as we gear up for the start of the season. We'll talk about the two most, probably biggest impact acquisitions for both teams in Andre Burakovsky and Vladimir Tarasenko to see who may have the bigger impact. We'll, of course, check in on Connor Bedard, and yeah, there will be some contract discussion as well. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wilds, bringing in my good friend Jack Bushman of Locked On Blackhawks. And Jack, it's getting to be that time as we get set for the start of the season. And just looking at both of these teams, I think it's fascinating, just right off the top, that you had two players that were acquired by both of these teams that are coming off of kind of down years that are capable of some pretty big things, as evidenced by what they've done previously throughout their career. And both teams are betting on a return to that form. So just give me your thoughts on Andre Burakovsky coming in, obviously acquired from the Seattle Kraken. Well, what are you thinking for Burakovsky to potentially be an impact piece in that top six?
Well, first off, Seth, just want to say always good to talk hockey with you again. I know we're closing in on the start of the regular season, trying to grind through this month of August, which always makes it a little tricky on both of us content-wise. And I think also beginning the show in this fashion, talking about Vladimir Tarasenko, as we'll get to here in just a moment, and as you just asked me about Andre Burakovsky, goes to show it wasn't necessarily the most noteworthy or exciting summer in terms of additions for either of these two teams, but always excited to talk through Blackhawks and Minnesota Wild hockey with you on the show here, my friend. Andre Burakovsky, as you said, probably the most notable offseason addition for the Blackhawks here this summer. And I mean, no lose type of trade for general manager Kyle Davidson, sending Joe Veleno back to Seattle, who wound up being put on unconditional waivers there, was likely a buyout candidate here in Chicago anyway. So to go and get Andre Burakovsky for basically nothing is definitely a win for the Blackhawks. And even though it's been a little bit of a struggle for Burakovsky ever since he departed the Colorado Avalanche when he helped them win the Stanley Cup, his second career Stanley Cup title, I do think he is a good bounce back candidate here in Chicago, considering the opportunity that he's likely going to get could even possibly be on that top line along with Connor Bedard, considering his size and goal scoring ability as a left-handed shot. Likely going to be in the top six regardless. We'll see, kind of where things sort out in terms of the first and second lines when training camp rolls around, but he's going to be given a good opportunity here, and he's going to have some decent skill guys around him, whether it's Bedard on that top line, Frankie Nazar centering the second line as he's expected to do for the Blackhawks this year. And Burakovsky is a guy who has a really good shot and can play with some speed. So I do think there's a good opportunity for him to find his footing here in Chicago. And again, considering what the Blackhawks paid in order to get him, and even though his contract isn't necessarily looked at one that's, very valuable, the Blackhawks obviously are in a situation where they can take on that cap hit. So no real downside, I think, to acquiring Andre Burakovsky. And I think he's going to be a pretty solidified member of that top six all season long here in Chicago, and will be given all the opportunities in the world to have that bounce back season, Seth.
Yeah, and on the Wild side, they're looking at the exact same thing for Vladimir Tarasenko. He's got the pedigree as a goal scorer, and it felt like all season that top six, that wing spot opposite either Matt Zuccarello or Matt Boldy, it just felt like there wasn't enough shooting on that line. You expect your second line is going to be able to provide some goal scoring. They just never were able to get that, and even though he's coming off of a down season, it was a Detroit team that just they got off to such a bad start. They made the coaching change. They kind of started to play better, and then it kind of fell apart again. I don't think Tarasenko, even though he did play some minutes with players like Alex DeBrincat, I don't think he was put in a position to be on a line that was capable of being offense oriented. And now coming here to Minnesota, and depending on how the top six plays out, he's going to either be playing with Matt Boldy, or if Boldy plays on the top line with Kaprizov, he's going to be playing with Matt Zuccarello on line two as a playmaking option on the other side. I think that puts him in position to get fed a lot of pucks. And if he can just bury some one-timers, I think he stands a great chance to eclipse 11 goals, which is what he had last year. And this is a team that has been such a glaring weakness that if they could just get somebody to score 20, 25 goals in that spot, they're going to look like a savior. And that's really just all they need at this point. So we'll see which player ends up having more of an impact. But speaking of impact, obviously not only on the ice as far as players go, Chicago made a change behind the bench as well. Luke Richardson no longer the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. So talk to me a little bit about that. Do you think that was the right decision? And do you think, more importantly, Chicago got the right guy to replace him?
Yeah, really good questions there. And even though Blashill wasn't my ideal candidate to be the next head coach of the Blackhawks, I would have loved to have gone and see them get David Carl from Denver, but obviously he made the choice to return there. Mike Sullivan would have been another candidate that I really would have liked to see them go and get. I don't know if he was considering the Blackhawks all too much, though, considering just kind of the position they're in. Todd Nelson was another guy who I was really looking at, considering all the success he's had in the AHL the last few years. I know not much NHL head coaching experience. He had only done it as an interim, but a guy who's very familiar with the development level, and that's still the stages where the Blackhawks are at in this rebuild right now. But what I will say, Seth, is bringing in a guy like Blashill, who does have head coaching experience, was the bench boss for the Detroit Red Wings for 7 seasons. And even though things didn't go very well there in his first head coaching stint, he does have that experience, at least. In the Blackhawks' last 3 head coaches, each were first-time NHL head coaches. So definitely needed some experience, and Blashill provides that. And I do think, him spending a couple of years with John Cooper, one of the best in the business, being the assistant for the Tampa Bay Lightning, gave him some good perspectives and some more opportunity to build on that experience. And recently, Seth, Jeff just had an interview with one of the Blackhawks beat writers, and he kind of broke down some of his tendencies and some of the strategy and systems he wants to utilize on the ice. And I do think, along with his experience and kind of the shakeup and how he wants to go about things, is going to be beneficial for the Blackhawks, especially now that they have more of these young, high draft picks that they've taken over the last 2 to 3 years are starting to arrive on the professional scene. Most of them have strong skating ability. I think the Blackhawks are going to be they're going to have a much higher ceiling offensively, and they're going to play much more aggressively, which will fit their style of play as a result. So I think that's just going to give them much more options and much more upside out there on the ice. So even though I was a little bit, in between when Blashill first got announced as the new head coach, since the last couple of months have passed, I've definitely gotten more and more encouraged. And I absolutely feel like the Blackhawks are going to be in the best position they've been in quite a while heading into this 25-26 season.
Well, the interesting part too about Blashill is, you want to see what a coach learns from kind of going through those lean years, because obviously Chicago is still kind of trying to come back up, and you've got these coaches, as you alluded to, that are coming in with no head coaching experience at the NHL level. They don't really know how to kind of pull a team out of it, and it may just be the solution may just be finding somebody that has kind of been in that situation, and now having had time to kind of step away from it and analyze it, knowing, okay, this is kind of where things went wrong for me. This is what I need to do to try to pluck the team out of this and go forward.
Yeah. And I think Blashill, again, those 2 years or 3 years that he spent with the Tampa Bay Lightning put him in a really good spot to go and again, get perspective and get another opportunity to kind of look at things and see maybe what went wrong in that first stint with Detroit. And obviously there's a lot that goes into it, right? Detroit was, coming off of that 21 or 22 consecutive years of making the playoffs. There was going to be a downfall after that. And unfortunately, Blashill was the head coach. The Yzer plan maybe hasn't gone as fast as some folks up in Detroit would have hoped. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But like you alluded to, Seth, I do think now he gets that opportunity to go and kind of retry to or make right from what possibly didn't go the way that he had hoped with the Detroit Red Wings in a new situation here in Chicago.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not going to ask you about Frankie Nazar right now. I'm going to save that for the end because we're going to spend the third segment talking about the young players on this team. All these crossovers, it seems like, go right to how do you think the Central's going to play out? I want to talk about the young guys for segment 3.
Perfect.
So we'll talk about Frankie Nazar in the third segment. I would be remiss if I did not ask about the face of the franchise right now at just 19 years old, Connor Bedard. And so before we break, you're looking at Connor Bedard 2 seasons into his career. He is 20 years old now. He played a full 82 games this past season and a little bit of a bump in points, got up to 67 with 23 goals, 44 assists. So, you're seeing the offense obviously right away. There will be other parts of the game that'll be added as Bedard gets older. So what's next? Like, what is next in his development, Jack, that you want to see him kind of add to the arsenal this season to take that next step forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, first off, I know there have been some criticisms out there maybe about Bedard and maybe not living up to the hype. I think he's had 2 very solid first NHL campaigns to be the leading scorer of the Blackhawks in back-to-back seasons, back-to-back 60-point campaigns, back-to-back 20-goal seasons. Like, kid's doing just fine considering this has been one of the worst teams in hockey, and he hasn't had a lot of help alongside him. But there are definitely areas where he still has to improve and he still has to grow. And I do think one that's really attainable for him, Seth, is in the goal scoring department. I mean, this kid's shot, he has 30, 40 goal upside. Absolutely. I think he has to become a little bit more of a diverse goal scorer, though. I think naturally he shoots a lot glove high. And I just think adding some layers to where he's going to go makes him less predictable for NHL goaltenders, and just sneaking shots 5-hole every now and again to keep goalies on their toes. And one quote I always come back to is, I know it was from Patrick Kane. I think he was telling it to Jack Hughes about how he had an uptick in goal scoring in his career when he started to shoot low. Started just going different spots than most players typically would go, again, just to add layers to his game. So I'd like to see Connor Bedard. I think there's another level for him to get to in the goal scoring department and in general with just being aggressive. I know he wants to make plays out there, but the best play at the end of the day, more times than not, is Connor Bedard putting the puck on net with that type of release. So I think there's another layer for him to get to in the goal scoring. And then there's definitely room for him to improve in the 200-foot game, Seth. I think he made strides in that last year, and there have been pictures shown of him on social media recently. The kid looks absolutely shredded. I know he's been training along with Macklin Celebrini here recently, who obviously was an excellent 200-foot player as a rookie last year for the San Jose Sharks. I think that's going to be, oh my God, the kid's an absolute stud. And I think that's going to be good for Connor Bedard, and just training with the guy like Celebrini, right, who he could potentially, have a rivalry with in the West Coast sometime down the road, like pushing each other to be better. And I think will help round out Bedard's game a little bit. And it's not due to a lack of effort or anything. It's just he's still, 19, 20-year-old kid who's a little bit undersized. He's got some things to figure out, but I definitely think he's capable. He's just got to put it all together a little bit more on the defensive side of things to truly be a top line center iceman that we can feel comfortable about in all situations.
Much like those on Wall Street say you need to diversify your stock portfolio, Connor Bedard needs to diversify his shot portfolio.
Yes.
There's your tip for the day. We're going to flip, and I will let Jack ask as many Minnesota Wild questions as he has. I'm sure burning questions about the art of signing a contract, How hard can it be to put pen to paper? We'll talk about that and plenty more as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch or puck drop. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. The panoramic seat views is a game changer because if you've ever had even a little bit of an obstructed seat view for a concert or a game, it's miserable. And Game Time has eliminated that as a possibility because you can see everything before you buy the tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to today's crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks. Again, we are your team every day and your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're getting close to the start of the regular season. Training camp is going to be going on before we know it. And if you want to make sure that you stay up to date on your favorite teams with everything, if a player sneezes wrong, you'll know. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of your favorite Blackhawks or Wild news. All right, Jack, I will put myself in the questions chair. So if you have any Minnesota Wild questions, hit me.
I got a couple for you, Seth. The first one, though, and I really do hate to do it to you considering how we were talking about things prior to recording, but I think the biggest question looming over the Minnesota Wild right now is the Marco Rossi contract situation. But I want to start before we even got to this offseason, Seth, because I know we texted a little bit about this, but I'm sure there are many Blackhawks fans who don't quite understand what's transpired with Rossi in Minnesota, considering, I mean, this guy was a 60-point player in the regular season last year, back-to-back 20-goal campaigns. But then his role in the Stanley Cup playoffs seemed to be a little bit more diminished than what it was in the regular season for whatever reasons. He and his camp didn't seem to be too happy about it, leading into, him being an RFA here this summer. So I guess I'm just curious kind of how did this all come apart? Why did Marco Rossi not have as large of a role in the Stanley Cup playoffs? And just take me to how we got to this point is my first question of the Marco Rossi summer here, I guess, if we can dub it.
Yeah, it's a long and winding road to this point because you really could not ask for more from Marco Rossi and have him deliver. I know his career started off a little rocky. He had the first 19 games that he played. He had 1 point. He got sent down to Iowa to kind of work on things, but he did. He spent the whole offseason continuing to work on things. He came into camp the following year in great shape. He had a 20-goal season. He just continues to put in the work, and this past season, he eclipsed his goals and points and another 20-goal, this time a 60-point campaign. He was one of only 3 Minnesota Wild players to play 82 games this year. He just looks the part. And yeah, I know there have been a couple of dips as far as production goes throughout the season where he's kind of gone cold, but Marco Rossi, he's a center. Like he's not somebody that is going to generate his own chances. He's great at hammering home rebounds. He's great at playing in close to the net. And if you stick players on opposite sides of anybody that are just not capable of driving offense or helping with puck possession, yeah, you're not going to score. So it just has kind of led to this situation where it's pretty obvious that Bill Guerin just is not, he's just not a fan of undersized centers. And Rossi, he's 5'10", 5'11". That there's nothing he can do about that. But it's become very clear that Bill Guerin just does not think that he is a top 6 center on a playoff winner. Joel Eriksson Ek has been just the ultimate center for this Minnesota Wild team, but I think if we're being honest, if you look at him on a playoff roster, he's probably a 2C. So the quest for a number 1 center has been a long one as well. But Bill Guerin he does not feel like Marco Rossi is a 1C or is a 2C. Like if he had the ability to put his own playoff roster together, then he is putting Rossi at either a 3 or a 4C on that team. And when it comes to contracts, and this is the phrase that I've used over and over again, market rate. There is a clear disconnect between what the market is paying for these types of players and what Bill Guerin wants to offer Marco Rossi in return. Bill Guerin offered a 5x5 at one point. Marco Rossi's camp clearly wanted a 7x7. That has been their most common ask. And honestly, I can't really fault him because of the fact that Matt Coronado got 6.5 for 7 years. Frankie Nazar, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, got a mega deal just within the last couple of hours before we recorded this. That is the market rate for these types of players. And it's no different than if you're going and buying groceries. If you're going to go buy a cut of steak from the grocery store, you may not want to pay $16 for it. That's the market rate. And it sounds like there's been some work, some progress towards a resolution with this. It sounds like from what Michael Russo said, he suspects it's going to be some sort of a bridge deal, like 2 or 3. And this will allow Rossi to quote unquote prove it by continuing to just do what he does. He's added another 16, 17 pounds of muscle this offseason. So he's going to just be a tank when it comes to season time. So if he doubles down, if he is able to do what he has done over the last couple of seasons, then maybe Bill Guerin kind of softens his tone a little bit. But it just feels to me like there is really no way to kind of change Bill Guerin's mind unless Rossi just performs like crazy. He just already has kind of said in his head, like, this is just not a guy that's a top 6 center for me on my playoff team.
Very interesting development for sure, considering, 23-year-old kid, 60-point type of season. Bill Guerin thinking about a bigger guy. What was he, like 6'2", 6'3", well over 200 pounds, a little rugged on his skates. I guess I could see why, maybe he doesn't necessarily like that type of player, or at least that high in his lineup, considering just how much size most of these teams have when they win the Stanley Cup nowadays. So I do get it, but at the same point in time, 60 points is 60 points. And you just outlined a couple of contracts for guys who make similar-ish money and probably did not have that same type of production that we saw out of Marco Rossi. But you said, sounds like there could be some sort of bridge deal coming. So I'm very interested to see what's going to come from that. Yeah. But I do want to ask on a better note for Minnesota Wild here, Seth. The young defenseman on the back end has to have you excited for the future of this blue line moving forward. Brock Faber obviously has been up in the NHL these last couple of years. You now got Zeev Buium joining on to the professional ranks. And David Jiricek, I know it hasn't been like a steady start to his professional career, but still young in his own right, and was highly selected in the NHL draft not all that long ago. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this blue line as a whole, because it really does feel like from afar, it's probably going to be the strength of this team moving forward? I know obviously Matt Boldy, Kirill Kaprizov are the studs of the offense, but I think the world of Zeev Buium. Brock Faber's work kind of speaks for itself these last couple of years. So just talk to me about your excitement for this blue line and Zeev Buium joining the professional ranks in particular, and kind of what you're expecting from him, because he was a kid I would have loved for the Blackhawks to take in the 2024 NHL draft. Sadly, they just didn't need a left-handed defenseman, but I've said many times on my show, I would not be surprised if Zeev Buium winds up as the best of all of those blue liners from that draft class.
Yeah, I'm the thought of potentially, 3-4 years down the road having a top pairing of Zeev Buium and Brock Faber gives me night sweats. I mean, it's just so fortunate to have not only one of those players, but both of them as the long-term answer on the blue line for this team. Because something that I talked about in yesterday's episode, when just talking about Jonas Brodin's season, we still saw the elite play from Brodin that we've seen over the last few years, but he only played 50 games, and he's only played 82 games in one season in the last 7 years. So the injury concerns are starting to really mount for him. He's also 32. Jared Spurgeon is 35. Those guys are not going to play forever. And so being able to get out in front of this and have your clear succession plan in place with Brock Faber and Zeev Buium as kind of the next face of that defense is that is the perfect scenario for that to unfold in that way. Some of the things that I like about Zeev's game is how fluid he is with the puck, how fluid he is as a skater, how just gifted he is out there when he's on the ice. But it's even I had a chance to see him at Wild Development Camp last year. And just the mentality that he has from being at Denver, from winning the national championship, that winning mentality translates in such crazy little ways. Like, there was a puck drill that the team was doing, and he was, every time the whistle blew, he was the last one to have the puck, and he went out of his way to go grab the puck from whoever had it. And that is just one of those little mentality things that you learn when you are, at a program like Denver. Is that going to have any level of impact on his game whatsoever at the NHL level? No, but it just goes to show you that he's kind of got that intensity to him, and that when the going gets tough, those quick trigger instincts just take over. And he's somebody that I think has all of that. Brock Faber, similar level. He was a very decorated player for the Gophers. And you combine those two guys, and that is going to bring a nice winning mentality to this team. David Jiricek, too, is another guy. I know he had just from getting traded, being with Columbus at the start of the year, getting sent down, coming to Minnesota, playing at the NHL level when there were 8 defensemen injured, then getting sent back to Iowa and then getting hurt to end the year. He had a lot going on. And from the sounds of it, he's getting his skating in this offseason. He's been working on that. He's in really good shape. I expect, especially with Jonas Brodin out of the lineup to start the year, I expect that he's going to play a pivotal role. And I know there were a lot of eyeballs on Jack Johnson signing a PTO.
Blackhawks legend, Jack Johnson, you should say. Put some respect on that name.
That is the only respect that will be put on that name. And
I can't believe he's still getting PTOs, man.
Yeah. What I have told everybody, or tried to, is he hasn't made the team yet. He's being brought in as a camp body because the Wild are not going to play all of their regular players a bunch. Best case scenario for the Wild is that Jiricek and Buium look great, and Johnson does enough to where some other team calls him and says, hey, we got a spot for you. Because I just don't see there being one for the Minnesota Wild. Jiricek is a big body. He's got a great shot, and I think that will definitely play at the NHL level. The thing with him is just the skating, and I think after a full off season of working on that and kind of getting himself in as good a shape as he can, I think he's going to be just fine. And I think he's going to be another huge piece to this defense that, you think about the impact of losing Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin and how big that would be. This might be one of the few teams that is capable of like offsetting that and just being like, yeah, we're fine. We're going to have minimal road bumps between this generation and the next. And that to me is very exciting.
Yeah, 100%. And that was kind of how I was looking at it when taking a gander at Puckpedia. I was like, man, Jared Spurgeon's 35 years old now, and Jonas Brodin, as you mentioned, 32. But of course, really good spot for the young defensemen to learn from those guys before they kind of take the keys and take over that blue line. Last question I got for you here, Seth, involves the goaltender department for the Minnesota Wild. Philip Gustafsson obviously looks like he's still going to be the number one, but Jesper Wallstedt, it feels like we've been waiting for this kid for seemingly forever. I believe he's got only 5 NHL starts under his belt at this point in time. Just curious your thoughts on Jesper Wallstedt and what feels like probably his biggest NHL opportunity that he's going to get. Is he expected to be the backup for the Wild here this year? And just kind of talk me through your expectations for him now that it looks like he's going to be a full-time NHLer.
Jesper had a very up and down season, to say the least. He got hurt a couple of times. The Iowa team in front of him was not very good. But I also think right off the bat, the Wilds just, if they would have been a little more deliberate and careful with how they phrased things, I think we would have viewed this a little differently. Obviously, he still dealt with the injuries, but Bill Guerin was adamant from the beginning of the season, like the weeks leading up to the season during training camp, that the Wild were going to carry 3 goalies. And he said, we're going to carry 3 goalies. We're going to get all of these guys in. And I remember being skeptical of that even at that point and saying, you have a few bigger fish to fry, I think, than a third goalie. And I think one of the reasons we didn't see Jesper as much, if at all, last year was because of how good Marc-Andre Fleury was. I don't think the Wild expected that he was going to be able to hold up the way that he did. But now with him retired, that spot is clearly open. And the Minnesota Wild did bring in a little organizational depth this offseason in Cal Peterson. But the message to Jesper Wallstedt is this: you just have to beat out Cal Peterson to get the backup goalie job. Like, there is literally no one else that is pushing him. And if he can't beat out Cal Peterson in camp this year, then he is definitely not ready to be the backup. But I think from what I've seen, his mindset has changed. He's really taken what happened this past season and used it as a learning experience. He is a very, very hard on himself. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table, because if he can be a solid goalie as a youngster, this goaltending tandem has Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark written all over it. And if you have a very capable backup that takes some pressure off the starter, but when the starter's Philip Gustafsson, if Jesper turns into a good goalie, this is going to be one of the best tandems in the entirety of the NHL. Let me repeat, if Jesper Wallstedt pans out and has a good season, this is going to be one of the best goalie tandems in the entire NHL.
And only 22 years old is Jesper Wallstedt as well. So the fact that maybe he hasn't solidified that spot up to this point in time is really not the end of the world. This is still before most goaltenders arrive onto the NHL scene, which I think is, always tough for fans to keep in perspective. You want guys to be good right away and you want them to make an impact immediately. But Jesper Wallstedt, I think, has still a super high ceiling, and we'll see if he can wind up beating out Cal Peterson for that backup goaltending job, which I'll give him a good chance of doing that here in these next couple of weeks, Seth. But that's about all I had on the Minnesota side of things. I know we're already getting to about 35 minutes here, and we still got some young players to talk about, my friend.
Yeah, we're going to finish up with a look at some of the youngsters that will impact these seasons. And just on one final note on Jesper Wallstedt, goalies are weird, man. The goalie path is a long and lonely road And at 22, if Jesper can pan out here this year, he's well ahead of the curve. So we'll maybe talk a little more about Jesper in the final segment, but we got some other young players to discuss, especially on the offensive side for the Minnesota Wild, also on the Chicago side of the equation. So all that coming up as we finish today's crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks after this.
Gotta let you all know, though, today's episode is sponsored by the fine folks over at FanDuel. August 26th is FanDuel Futures Day, which is a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. And I've already put together a very interesting parlay here, Seth. I got Bijan Robinson, Offensive Player of the Year, parlayed with Tua Tagovailoa, Comeback Player of the Year. To join me, fade me, or make your own play, go and check out the FanDuel app today and start planning those futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
Final segment of today's special crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks. Once again, we thank you for making both shows your first listen each and every day. And we're going to talk about some of the young guns that could have a major impact on this season for both teams. And Jack, I want to start because this just happened, and I will direct listeners to Locked On Blackhawks for more on the Frankie Nazar extension. Literally just signed 7 years, $6.599991 million. A pretty big extension for a youngster on the Blackhawks roster. Let's Goldilocks and the Three Bears this. Too high, too low, just right for Frankie Nazar for that extension.
It's for sure going to wind up being too low in a couple of years, Seth. And I know he only has 56 NHL games. He's only 21 years old. To sign him to a 7-year deal at, just shy of $6.6 million. He, of course, had to get the number 91 in there somehow, as these hockey players are always superstitious, right? Even though he is still very fresh onto the NHL scene, if you've watched the Blackhawks with Frank Nazar in the lineup, or even if you happen to watch any of the United States games at the World Championship, where Frank Nazar was one of the driving forces to help them win their first gold medal in that tournament in nearly 100 years, then you know this kid is going to be a monster, Seth. An absolute monster. 2 years ago, following Bedard's rookie season, once he had graduated from the prospect stage, I had Frank Nazar as the number one prospect in the Blackhawks organization, and it's been a pretty deep prospect pool these last couple of years, but that's how highly I think of Frank Nazar. He plays with high intensity, high pace. Even though he's only 5'10", he doesn't let that shy him away from the dirty areas or being gritty. He's not afraid to mix it up. Nothing scares him out there on the ice, and he can play a skill game as well. So I really do think the sky is the limit for a guy like Frank Nazar, and I really think he's going to be buzzing around the ice for a long time, making plays in multiple different areas. He's going to be a special talent, and he's going to be one of those guys who is instrumental in all of the winning that the Blackhawks are going to be doing down the road. He just plays a winning style of hockey. So from the outside, I can understand why it seems like a little bit of a gamble considering his lack of experience. But that, I really believe, I try to say this as unbiasedly as I can, I think this has the potential to be one of the best contracts in the NHL. Like, signed through 2033, once this kid is 24, 25 and has some more experience under his belt, in the way the salary cap is going to go up, Seth, like, it's going to look like a drop in the bucket. I saw someone post on Twitter today in terms of how the cap is going up. $6.5 million in 2028 is going to be like how $4 million is right now. It's going to look like absolutely nothing. So I'm super excited about this contract. I think it's an absolute steal and bargain for a player of Frank Nazar's caliber. And I really can't talk highly enough about this kid. I think he's going to be so instrumental in the Blackhawks success moving forward.
Then I would like to put a friendly wager on the table. And I will see your Frank Nazar and raise you a Danila Yurov, who is going to be getting his first look at American soil as an NHLer this season. The Wild's bringing him in after a successful stint in the KHL. His KHL team was the champions, not this past season, but the one before that. And he played a pivotal role on that team. Now, it will probably take Yurov a little time to get acclimated, but he profiles as somebody with top 6 high-end skill. So I would like to, because I'm feeling adventurous, I'd like to put a total points on the board, Frankie Nazar versus Danila Yurov for the 2025-2026 season.
Oh, you're on. And we could get like creative with this. I think we could do like I don't know what's a staple of like Minnesota food, or what's your favorite Minnesota-y type of food, but feel like you should have to buy me some like Chicago style food. I should have to buy you some Minnesota style food if, the winner or the loser. You get what I'm putting down here?
I like this. I'm
100% in agreement with this. I'll back my guy Frank Nazar all day, any day.
Yeah, because this is the exciting part of every season, whether you're a playoff team or whether you are a team that is just trying to kind of put that next core together, is when you get those opportunities to see what the young kids have in store. And moving Freddie Gaudreau to the Seattle Kraken paved the way for Danila Yurov to have a spot on the roster. He's expected to play center, and I think he may start as like a third line guy just to get him acclimated. But if Vladimir Tarasenko, if he does not live up to that second line spot at all, Danila Yurov's going to get a crack there. And if he gets it and he holds that spot, he may never give it back.
I actually am pretty familiar with Danila Yurov, considering a fellow Blackhawks prospect, a 2023 second-round pick, Roman Kanserov, played for Metallurg Magnitogorsk in the KHL when they won the Gagarin Cup back in 2023. So I'm familiar with your boy Danila Yurov and his work over in Russia. I think it should make for a pretty interesting wager here this season.
Yeah, this is like, I want to do more of this, because this just takes it from a whole different level to just, oh, hey, let's see how our teams do head to head. No, we get a full season. We get a full season battle going on here between these two. It's just going to add a layer of fun. And I'm always somebody that says, if there's a bet to be had, let's make it double.
Yeah, let's go. You're my type of guy then, Seth. You're my type. Hey, you want to go double? I'll give you a double one. Let's go the battle of Minnesota Golden Gophers defensemen, because I think the world of Sam Rinzel. For the Blackhawks. I think he had 6 assists in his first 9 NHL games last year, and I really believe he's going to be a full-time NHLer this season. Let's go points. Let's go points for Brock Faber and Sam Rinzel. How many did Brock have last year? Did he have 30?
He had I think he had 29 in a little bit. I hesitate to say down season, but it felt like he had a lot on his plate. The season before that, he had almost 50. I will say that. So yeah. I'm in. Like I'm down.
I could look like a fool on this one. So, but that's how confident I am in my guy Sam Rinzel that I'd even do double or nothing on this bad boy for you.
Okay, I'm in. I'm down for this. Listeners, in both shows, comment who you think is going to win this. We'll set the stipulations, because there are too many Minnesota food items I got to pick. I gotta pick at least one or two. So we'll get that ironed out. Listeners, let us know in the comments who you think has this bet won, and we'll track it all season. And there will be plenty of rubbing it in back and forth, I'm sure. But
oh yeah,
Jack, always good to catch up with you. And listeners, make sure to follow along for both shows. Nobody does it better than Locked On Wild and Locked On Blackhawks. And we'll have you covered every step of the season. So like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We got you covered with new episodes all week long right here as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.